Sometimes a job comes along that nobody else wants. And you look at it and you think to yourself, a person would have to be crazy to take on that mess. Then something inside grabs you and you think to yourself, sure, it's a dirty, thankless job, but somebody has to do it. I'm BugeyeBob, and this is one of those jobs.
Well, there it is, a 1958 Austin Healey Bugeye Sprite. Another fine mess I've gotten myself into. Do have the grill for it. Somebody attempted to do some body work and never bothered to strip the paint off underneath, which is why you got that big rust spot there that shouldn't be there. The rear end was bashed in a bit. Bottom here is rusted out a bit. Oops, let's go the other way. One of the bumpers is missing. Has the fiberglass top. Has the special, don't know if you can see this, but has the very special aftermarket flow-through air conditioning. Most of the gauges look in there and complete. Don't know if they're actually working or not. We'll find that out. Windshield wipers need straightened out. I have no idea what the open whatever it is on there. El Suno expires 1967. Bit of a crack on the top here. Fiberglass, I can fix that. The rear window I do have, just need new gasket for it once the top is fixed. Has the self-deflating right rear sand tire. Absolutely necessary for when you're driving on the beach in Pensacola. Has bass backwards opening doors. You push the handle down to open the door. And let's see. Oh gosh, there's a little bit of air to flow through the door too. That's nice. Let's see here. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Yep. The floor pans are in order. 4-speed gearbox. Under the hood. Oh, well, that's convenient. Little 4-cylinder motor, 949 cc, rusted out battery box. Let's see if I can get this damn thing to work around here. I'm thinking this was originally painted yellow. I think that's the original factory color. We'll find out. Promises to be an interesting project. Join me for the ride on Patreon, folks. This is going to be fun, and I can use all the help I can get. Thanks.
Take a few minutes to talk about some specific damage areas on the car. This right front quarter panel, you can see that whoever had the car at one point put a bunch of this black body putty on. It appears to be a metallized or metallicized, or whatever you want to call it, putty. But the problem is that they didn't go down to bare metal, and they didn't straighten out any of the dents or try to fix anything. They just smeared this crap on, and basically you end up with a real mess when you do that. It gets water underneath of it. You can see there's a big, where the yellow arrow is, there's a big splotchy, rusted out spot. That basically had body putty spread all over it. And then the water got behind the putty and it just rusted the car out in that spot. Let's take a closer look at this fade image that you see on the windshield right here. So this is a 1967, either a registration or inspection sticker, which kind of makes me wonder if this car has ever been driven since 1967. Here you can see just behind the left front wheel that the rocker panel has been punched in. Let's take a little bit closer look at that. This is kind of weird because it doesn't look like something hit the wheel and drove it back into that corner. It looks like something hit the rocker panel itself on that corner and punched it in. One of the surprising things is that the door gaps on the driver's side door are actually very good. Kind of unusual considering it's pretty cheap build to begin with, and it's had a hell of a lot of rust damage and other damage over the years. There's a little bit of a problem down in this lower rear quarter panel, or wing as they would call it. Let's take a little bit closer look at that. So this looks like it's just good old-fashioned rust. We'll either have to buy or make a replacement piece to put into that location. The whole bottom rear deck in this area is rusted out, as is the interior floor pan in the trunk area. Fortunately, they make a replacement panel that you can buy for that rear area where the license plate goes on. But the floor panel, I don't know. This spot right here is probably the most complex problem to deal with. You've got the curvature of the right rear fender. You've got that light mounting in the way. It was punched in on the rear panel, on the rear deck where it comes down. So you've kind of got a mess of punched in, chunked up sheet metal there. That's going to take a lot of difficult work. Here you can get kind of a side view of that punched in rear end damage that you tried to straighten out and then just slapped goop over. And you can see we've got a rusted out area here in that lower right panel. These two black oily spots tell me we've got a bad axle seal on this side. And the one bit of good news that we seem to have is this rocker panel doesn't really look too bad right there, so I'm hoping that it isn't rusted. I think it's just surface rust. Although there's been no real damage on this side of the vehicle, the door gaps are not as good as the originals on the other side. The first arrow shows the rust that's almost expected in this location. However, the large circular area is the result of some minor damage that was slathered over with metallized filler without being properly cleaned to base metal first. This resulted in the filler lifting off in spots and rainwater being able to remain between the filler and sheet metal for long periods of time, causing more rust spalling loose of the filler and more water being trapped behind it in a vicious circle. There is one of these large holes on each side of the rocker panel. These holes are where the jack is inserted to lift that side of the car if a tire needs to be changed. The holes are located so that both the front and rear tires on that side come up evenly off the ground at the same time. The front of this rocker panel looks pretty good. I've been looking at this gray stuff inside of the wheel wells, and I thought it might have been undercoating, but it actually looks almost like tar with stones in it. No idea what that actually is, but I suspect it'll be a mess to get off the car. More of that nasty metallized body filler to deal with. Right here we've got a combination of a crack in that lip around the opening for the grill. And it looks like, well, it is rusted out pretty bad, but it looks like this may have been another one of those spots where they just started slapping on some of that cruddy body filler. It also looks like there's some red paint there for some reason. The car, I don't think, was ever originally painted red, so I don't know why it would have been red right there. These two spots right here are a couple of dents and scratches in the bonnet. As you can see, the bonnet's pretty badly rusted, so it's going to take a lot of sanding, and God only knows what to get that mess straightened out. I videoed some areas on the bottom of the car, and I've pulled out some images from those videos, and I'm going to go over them now. This first one you see is the clutch hydraulic cylinder. Basically, you press down on the clutch of the car, and it hydraulically operates this little cylinder that throws the throwout bearing out and disconnects the transmission from the engine. It is a mess. The thing is totally locked up, I'm pretty sure. You can see it's just grease and grime and all sorts of rotted, nasty stuff. This is the bottom view of the differential, and the one thing we can be pretty certain of is that seal for the drive shaft where it goes into the differential, that seal is shot completely. We know that because of all the oil and crud that's built up on the bottom and outside edges of the differential. This shows the connection where the universal joint gets mounted to the differential. You're now seeing the drive shaft end of the connection for the universal joint. At some point in the past, the gas tank must have either rusted out or it was damaged somehow, because you can see that somebody went and covered the majority of the bottom of the gas tank, about 3/4 of the way on the sides, with fiberglass. And you can see where it's delaminated a little bit here. The next image you're going to see is going to show you where there's actually a drain in the bottom of the gas tank, which is kind of a neat idea. I kind of wish that American cars had that sort of thing, because you get to the situation where you got water in the bottom of the gas tank. It'd be kind of nice to be able to just drain it out. This is a very small gas tank. This tank only holds 7.2 gallons of gas. So even if you had to drain it out, you could probably stick a 5-gallon bucket underneath of the thing and drain it out most of the time. Here you can see the mechanical linkage for the handbrake. Here in the U.S., we tend to call that the emergency brake. I think you'd be in a real fix if you tried using this thing in an emergency. The first arrow shows the rod going over to the right wheel area. The second arrow shows linkage to the left wheel assembly. However, it's kind of hard to see the rod that goes over to that side of the car. At the top of this image, you can see the connection where the cable comes in from the handbrake itself inside of the car. The second arrow shows the rod that runs over from the mechanical assembly over to the left wheel assembly to set the brake itself. The handbrake works by pulling on these two rods, which spreads a cam that forces the leading shoe against the brake drum itself on each side of the rear of the car. Here we're getting into some real ugly damage to the car. It's the rocker panel behind the left front tire. The front of the car doesn't look like it ever had any damage. It doesn't look like anything hit that left front corner. So I'm thinking that somebody must have nailed a curb with this spot. It's going to take a lot of surgery to get this straightened out, and it's going to have to be done before the floor pan can be placed on the driver's side. This is where the left front subframe connects to the body. It's kind of hard to tell in this picture, but it's possible that that subframe is partially cracked away from the body. We're just going to have to see what we find when we get into it. Here you can see the left front suspension and the wheel well. It really doesn't look like there's any damage to anything up there. Nothing's crunched in except for where you can see the arrow pointing to the damage in that rocker panel. That was obviously crunched in, but the wheel well itself should straighten out pretty good once the rocker panel itself is corrected. As you can see, the floor pan is rusted out in the trunk area, and the bracket is barely holding that rear bumper up. This is the left rear spring mount. The springs on the rear are semi-elliptical, which is kind of odd. I'll show you a picture of that. The circle then mounts within a pocket on the body of the car right behind the passenger and driver's seats, and the other end actually mounts to the rear axle itself. This is the left rocker panel, left floor pan under the driver's seat, and the seat mount for the driver. These are the two lower transmission crossmember bolts. The crossmember connects to the transmission. There's two more bolts up inside of the passenger compartment that connect in through either side of the drive shaft tunnel. It's easiest to pull the engine and transmission out as one unit, and you're supposed to pull the drive shaft out with the engine and transmission at the same time. What can I say? It's a rusted out muffler and tailpipe. Looks like the hanger for both are just at the very right-hand side of the muffler itself. This is the canister that holds the oil filter. The oil filter itself is made out of folded up felt. It's not like a removable modern oil filter. This canister has a bolt on the bottom of it that actually runs up through the middle of the filter and connects it to the mount that sits on the side of the engine block. This is the oil pan. All of that ugly black goo on the right-hand side is oil that is leaked out of the rear main seal on the engine. The oil pan drain actually sits a little bit on the side of the oil pan and not on the bottom of it like you would expect with a modern vehicle. The red circle shows the exhaust hanger. The yellow arrow shows where the drive shaft connects to the pumpkin for the differential. And that green ellipse shows where it looks like oil is being thrown off of the drive shaft itself. It looks like oil is coming down the tunnel, and once it gets down through the tunnel where the drive shaft goes, it just gets flung out all over the place. This looks like the right front subframe for the front suspension is cracked away from the body itself. That's going to take some serious work if that's the case to get that straightened around. This is the inside of the right front wheel well and the right front suspension. Looks pretty good, needs cleaned up, might be a little bit of rust damage to take care of, but doesn't look too bad altogether. This is a right rear lever shock absorber, and I'm going to show you a little bit better picture of that shock absorber right now. So these absorbers are apparently a double piston type, and they are actually adjustable and rebuildable, unlike American shock absorbers. This shows you the right rear spring mount. The red outline shows you the spring mounting box, how it's molded to the body. The yellow oval shows you the spring securing set bolts, and the green oval shows you the U-bolts around the spring itself. This is a right rocker panel. You can see it looks like there's some pinhole rust along the bottom of it. This is definitely going to have to be fixed before a whole lot of work gets done on the rest of the floor pans and things like that. These rocker panels are main structural components on each side. They're actually what keep the vehicle together, given how it's unit body construction. The yellow arrow points to a spot where it looks like they actually put in an intentional hole to drain water out. But of course, when they do this, then they end up with dirt getting up in there and mud when it rains, and that kind of contributes to the rust. Yeah, this is supposed to be the floor pan underneath the driver's side. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of work on that. The floor pan is going to have to be replaced. The cross member channels are going to have to be replaced, and the front to back seat channel supports are going to have to be replaced. No, that is not some nasty molded Swiss cheese. That is actually the floor pan underneath the passenger seat. And again, we're going to have to replace the cross member channels and the front to back channels that support the passenger seat. This shows you where the speedometer cable connects into the back of the transmission. It also shows you what a great job that drive shaft tunnel does of collecting debris like limbs from trees. The two bolts circled in red control something within the internals of the transmission, or gearbox as they call it. So we're not going to deal with those right now. The arrow points to the oil drain at the bottom of the transmission. This is the front exhaust pipe hanger. It mounts to the rear of engine transmission mounting plate and transmission. Note that on this vehicle, the bell housing is cast into the front of the transmission itself. This is the transmission grounding cable. It's a woven copper cable that goes between the transmission and the body itself. It actually looks kind of like a very short battery cable. Why they put it here in a way out of the way place that's a real pain in the ass to get to when you have to pull the engine, I have no idea. Okay, folks, that's it for this episode of BugeyeBob. I really appreciate you watching and hope that, like me, you've learned a few things during this episode. Please like, subscribe, and comment on this video and share it with others. You can help support this project by becoming a member at Patreon. Patreon members get early access to the videos, and in the future there will be Q&A sessions and other live streams for Patreon members. You can follow the project on YouTube and Facebook at the links below. Once again, thank you for supporting this channel, and remember, sometimes the most important job you can do is a dirty, thankless job.